All right, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from New Jersey, I have Carlos Valdez da Pena. And Carlos, you are the founder of Corporate Collaboration Resources, which is a group effectiveness consulting firm. We're going to get into that. You're also an accomplished speaker. You were an internal consultant at Mars and IBM for a long time, 17 years in total, I think.
No, it's 20
And
years in total, actually.
20 years in total.
Between the two, yeah.
And you're the author of several books. Your latest is called Virtual Teams, Holding the Center When You Can't Meet Face to Face. So we're definitely going to dive into this. A lot to talk about today. But let's start with the first question. What does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
I need blue. So I'm a big fan of the color blue. I always have been since the time I was a child. So the wall behind me is painted a lovely shade of blue. It's funny, I'm not good with colors, so I don't know precisely how to describe that blue, but it's a deep, rich blue color. And I have my desk facing, actually, I have a standing desk. And it's I can't remember who makes it, but it's electronically raised and lowered. So I'll sit here for a while. When we're done, I will raise it up to the standing position. I also have a position that I use when I'm doing webinars and things like that, which lifts the desk up so that the camera is looking slightly down on me. In fact, not only is this wall blue, not is the wall behind me blue, but the wall I face is a slightly different shade of blue. In the background, if you were seeing me, you'd see a flip chart. That right now is full of my grandchildren's scribblings, but I keep it handy because that's where I think. To my right is a whiteboard. That's where I record stuff I need to pay attention to in the short term. I do have a full-size desk. To my left is a full-size desk that if I need to do some manual writing, I can turn to and scribble things out. I am sitting on the second floor of my home. My wife has an office just down the hall. We live in a townhouse sort of a setting. So it's not a lot of space, and I keep my door closed so that she and I don't bother each other too much. From time to time, I work from my basement, where I play my music, and we have a little workout area, but I also have a desk. If my wife is sleeping, for example, I'll sometimes do calls with teams in Asia. Calls, that's kind of an archaic term, Zooms, Microsoft Teams, whatever, but I'll conduct business at 6 in the morning. And I will go down to the basement to do that work. But this is my primary location. I got a few fake plants around the space. I got pictures on the wall. I have a mock teamwork poster behind me. It says teamwork. Underneath it in smaller, it says get to work. You're not being paid for the quality of your thinking, or something very cynical like that. Or you're not being paid to pursue your dreams, I think is what it says. I'm not a big fan of inspirational posters, so I got one of the fake ones and put it on my wall. The other thing on my wall I'm very proud of is there's an orange M&M character behind me that was rendered to look like me as an orange M&M when I left Mars about 3 years ago. And I keep that framed behind me. I have a number of Mars artifacts in the room around me because that 17 years was so profoundly important to me as a professional, but also as a person. So that's a bit about my workspace. And I do have a podcasting microphone on a mic stand off screen right now. And then I've got a gaming headset that I use for appearances on podcasts like this. Partly because I'm on a second floor with my wife's office just down the hall, so it keeps the ambient noise out, but it also is a pretty good quality mic. So there you go. There's a lot about my space.
Yeah, and it was a really nice description. It was a nice visual tour via words for the people that are not able to see the video. So I really enjoyed that. And it sounds like you have a really professional setup there. How long have you been working from home?
I started working from home in 2009 when it happened. Things happen for such random reasons. My oldest daughter got accepted to the University of Virginia. We were living in New Jersey. The out-of-state tuition for the University of Virginia was just sky high, still is. I mean, like most American universities, really expensive. At least and this is a state school, so if we lived in the state of Virginia, the cost to us would go down. So I went to my boss at the office in Hackettstown, New Jersey, and said, "Hey, Jim, would you mind if I just moved us down to Virginia? Mars's global headquarters is in McLean, Virginia, just outside D.C." And I said, "We've got an office down there I can go to if I need it, but it'll save me, I don't know, $20,000 a year." And he said, "Sure, doesn't matter where you work from, you're on an airplane all the time anyway," back in the days when we could do such things. So I moved to Virginia and started working out of a home office. And over that time, learned a great deal about having a home office. I've gone through a series of microphones, for example. When I
Right.
was preparing webinars, I needed a better mic than what was in my little laptop. And I've got, I don't know how many we now have that I've tried and experimented with. But it's been a long journey. Now, during the time that span of now 11 years, while I worked from home, I also spent a great deal of time flying to my clients, whether that was in Thailand or in Brussels or in Dubai. That, of course, hasn't been happening for a year. It's changed the nature, and we had to get even much more serious about how I worked from home and maybe even invest a little more in a better camera, for example. So it's been a long time and a lot of evolution along the way.
Mhm. And I want to dive into your book. I have so many questions, but let's start by diving into your book, Virtual
Sure.
Teams. So from what I understand, it's part of a series, the Resilience series.
Yes.
So there's a number of these books in the series, and your contribution was the one on virtual teams, holding the center when you can't meet face to face. So I'd love to know, let's start with, why did you write this?
Again, it's somewhat serendipitous. I had started working on a second book. My first book was called Lessons from Mars, and it was about my time at Mars and what I learned about collaboration there. But I started writing a second book that was more like we were calling it a field guide. I was working with a few colleagues on it, a user's manual for those who want to apply the principles that we developed while I was working at Mars for collaboration. And I was well into it. And then the pandemic hit. And my publisher called and said, "Carlos, I'm pulling together a series of books called, we're going to call it the Resilience series. I think it'd be great if you could contribute on virtual collaboration." I'd already started writing about the subject in articles and some for the book I was working on. And he said, "Here's the thing, we need to have this done in like 6 weeks. Literally
Oh,
written in
wow.
6 weeks." He said, "I want it to be limited. I think it was 20,000 words, around 100 pages." I said, "You know what, Tim, if I take this other book I've been working on and I just adapt it, I think we've got something to go with." So that's what I did. I took that book, and with the permission of my collaborators, I said, "Guys, I've got an opportunity to do this. Are you okay if I just go?" And they were both fine with it. And so I sat down, and for the next 6 weeks, it was almost nothing but writing. The good news, not for my pocketbook, but for the creation of a second book, was that most of my clients had said, "Carlos, we have to stop all our work until we figure out how we're going to do all this virtually. That is how we do team effectiveness work virtually." I said, "Oh man, that's gonna hurt the wallet." But it opened up this window where I could write all day, every day for 6 weeks, and it wouldn't interfere with anything else. So it all sort of came together, and there was the book.
It is strange how life sort of hands us these put together puzzle opportunities at times. Like, it's bizarre. So good. We
Yep,
take it and run with it, right? Like,
yep, there you go.
never waste a good opportunity.
That's
So
right.
in the book, you talk about the high performance collaboration framework. And I know it's quite in depth. So I know we don't have time to go super in depth with it today, but what I'd love to hear is an overview of what that is.
Okay, so our research at Mars, which was part of developing a leadership development program, we wanted to look at giving managers and leaders something practical they could use to help their teams become better. Something that went beyond the conventional approaches to team building, which we found weren't really doing much in terms of team outputs. So we conducted some research based on data I had gathered on about 120 teams at that point. And garnered a few key insights. The primary insight was around the fact that the big barrier to collaboration was the fact that we had so many really strong individuals at Mars who were really good at what they did and really enjoyed their work and were satisfied when they got to do it and bring things to completion and then move on to the next thing. This is something that's known as in psychology, the achievement drive or the achievement motive. Very high achievement drive, and a lot of companies hire for that, right? You want results-oriented, achievement-driven people. And so they didn't need others to get great work done. When they needed help, they would reach out, but that was only occasional. Collaboration was really an afterthought because people were so self-reliant. Great, Mars was doing great as a business, that served us well, but if we really wanted the benefits of more collaboration, we were going to have to do something about that barrier. The way I framed it was that people are not being intentional about collaboration. They will turn to it as an afterthought. They will be reactive to put out a fire. If they need help, they'll reach out to somebody. But what we wanted was to stimulate more intentional collaboration. We knew that to do that, we had to create this mind hack, as a couple of friends of mine in Australia refer to it. We had to take that achievement drive and trick it. We had to trick it into thinking that collaboration was just one more thing I could achieve, one more thing on my to-do list. How could we make collaboration feel like just one more thing to be achieved? To do that, we needed what I generically call greater clarity about collaborative intent and collaborative focus. So we're driving for intentionality. To get that, we needed far greater clarity, right? To get that intentional collaboration, which was then going to have to be supported by some ways of working that would be consistent with the clarity, the big why of the collaboration, as well as the agreements we're going to make when we do decide to collaborate. We have to have our meetings line up with that. We have to have our decision-making processes line up. So those three buckets, what I call the three imperatives, you got to get greater clarity to drive intentional collaboration, and it's supported by discipline, by minimal discipline, only enough discipline to keep the gears turning and not an ounce more. Mars is not a very process-friendly place, so it couldn't feel heavy in terms of team process. So we said, here, you can design your team ways of working or processes in alignment with the commitments you make and the purpose you've decided on for yourself. So at a high level, clarity, intentionality, and discipline, that breaks down into 6 practices. And it's a set of guides and tools for teams to generate clarity, lock in their commitments and intentionality, and then build some appropriate team ways of working around it. That's what the framework does. And it's really was, from the beginning, meant to be given to managers as a package and as a way that they, without having to bring in a lot of fancy consultants like yours truly, could take the level of team performance up, working with their teams.
So it sounds to me like you're building systems and processes that help teams to actually, you're focusing more on the systems and processes to help teams actually collaborate more with purpose and intentionality instead of, I'm thinking of like Cal Newport's hyperactive hive mind, where people are sort of just going back and forth and talking with each other online, replacing the in-person conversation. But that's just communication. That's not actually collaboration. Right. So you really have to build the systems for that. I
would say I'm a structuralist. So you have a lot of people who go into team effectiveness through the door of relationships. The assumption there is that if we get the relationships right, the collaboration will follow. Right? I think that's a flawed assumption. In my experience, it's a flawed assumption. For example, I've been married to my wife for 33 years. I will never wallpaper with my wife. We simply, no matter how deep our relationship is, we shouldn't wallpaper together. We probably shouldn't be painting together. We have very different ways of working and getting things done. And I know better. The quality of our relationship has little to do with our effectiveness as a collaborative unit. Really has almost nothing to do with it.
Right.
It has occurred to me, and you used the word purpose a minute ago, Lisette. Purpose became foundational to our framework. Teams who stop and ask themselves, well, hang on a second. What is the value of our collaboration? how could our collaboration create more value than just the sum of our individual efforts? Which is how many teams regard teamwork, right? You do your bit, she'll do her bit, he'll do his bit, they'll do their bit. We add it all up and we get the outcome we want, but it's not really collaboration or teamwork. It's just what I call additive collaboration. But asking yourself, why does our collaboration really matter to our stakeholders in the business, to our customers outside the business, to ourselves? That gets into this great purpose conversation. And honestly, for a long time, that was the focus of my work with teams, was helping them just stop and ask that question and answer it in a fairly concrete way. So it's not woo purpose. It is, what's the value we can create, right? It's very
Right.
grounded in that kind of stuff. So I think of that as the beginning of the foundation of the structure that I like to
Which is
help
really
teams create.
the reason why we're in business, right? The purpose and the value that we're creating in the world is that
Well,
is why
yeah,
we're in business, right?
yes,
So,
and so Mars has a global vision for the company, and they've got a vision for each of the segments, but this is more specific to the team itself.
mhm.
So you take a bunch of R&D people and you huddle them up in a corner of an office somewhere, or you huddle them up on Microsoft Teams, right? Each one of those R&D people has a subspecialty, right? They're each good at something, they each do something, and left to their own devices, working as individuals, they could serve the mission or vision of the company. The question is, what's the value of the unit, of the team unit, if you will? There is value to be unlocked at that level. Can we identify that and how that will contribute to the business? Why? Because that helps clarify why it's worth collaborating, so that those achievement-driven individuals will go, oh, that looks like it's something worth doing. Now that I understand why it's valuable, I will jump in and do it. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I'm wondering, are we wasting too much time on team building activities when we should be more focused on driving
Funny,
purpose, right? Like we're all
funny
like
you
doing
should
these
ask.
quiz
Oh yeah,
nights.
yeah. Well, look, the social aspect of work is really important, and I think many of us, if we didn't get it before the pandemic, we get it now, right? Social
Right.
bonds matter to us at a biological level. We're wired for that. Our brains, our neurons are set up, many of them, just for that. So that matters a lot. But don't make the mistake that doing a quiz night or a wine tasting or tick on down the list, even if you're doing Myers-Briggs, don't think that that's going to make you a more productive, effective team. It will not. It will help. It'll be fun. You'll have some good stories to tell. But if what you want to do is take your annual sales revenue up in a measurable way, you're going to need to do more than that. Just getting
Right.
to know you as a person doesn't help. Just having a few
So,
chuckles together doesn't do the trick.
right. Hanging out over a plate of nachos and some beers is really fun, but it doesn't
Oh, it's
mean you're going
awesome.
to get right.
Right.
Right. So,
Now you got me hungry, and it's only 9:30 in the morning my time.
I was
That's
thinking like this is a bad thing to do for me too. So, so you don't really then have to like each other necessarily to collaborate together, which brings me to my next question, which is how do you collaborate with somebody that you don't like?
Well, there are a couple of answers to this. Yeah. I learned how to do this in the theater. I have a background in the theater. I have my first master's degree as an actor. And I was doing a show, several shows in a repertory company down in Florida with a guy I really didn't like. He was just not, he and I were just made differently, and we wouldn't hang out. We weren't buds, right? We weren't friendly, but we were good on stage together. And I would ask myself, God, why is it this guy and I just don't click? But our work on stage is exciting, actually. That sort of difference in us, that tension was working out well in some of the work we did on stage. And I came to understand that in the theater, and this does translate into the business world, we're telling a story, right? We have a very clear purpose for the group of us gathering on that stage to do what we're going to do. There is a clear deliverable we want to get to, which is to complete that show and get the audience laughing or clapping or whatever, right? And to help them feel that that money they spent on their tickets was well spent. no matter how you come at this, we had a very clear, defined purpose and a story we wanted to tell. We were lucky because we had a script, right? We had something an author had written that we could work to. But we still had to find our purpose within it. Every time you do a production of a play, you come at it a little differently. You're emphasizing different stuff. Teams need to do the same thing. So when a team has a clear story to tell, and I connect the team purpose we've been talking about, is central to that story. There's more to it, and we don't want to go into the details of the framework, but when we lay out our story using the framework that my colleagues and I at Mars developed, that story becomes more important than me as an individual. I've got a part to play in that story, and if there's a team member I don't like, you know what? I may try to bridge those differences through game nights or something, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too, because we have complementary skills that we bring to bear on telling this story of value creation. We have each of us invested in that purpose and that story, right? So we bring a passion that is greater than the fact that I just don't like the person. So that's one answer. One answer is if we ground our work in a clear purpose-driven story together, it makes it really easy to work with people you don't like. Now, there may be someone where you have to collaborate one-on-one. We have a subset of the team. It's me and my friend Sam, right? Not my friend, I use that term lightly. My colleague Sam, because I really don't like Sam. How do I make that work? That is a matter of what I call allyship. And that's a word that's used quite a bit, I think, in the LGBT community and the diversity and inclusion space. We have something we need to do together. So we need to create an alliance around the work. So think about France and England, right? Tremendous allies during the wars, but the two cultures really they're different, and they will put each other down over wine and cheese, and there's
pints,
or pints, yes, right, yeah. Depending on which side of the channel you're on, yeah. But they're cultures that really don't mesh well. I love both of them, right? I've spent time in both places. But they formed really useful alliances. And so that's what you have to think about when you must work closely with someone you don't like, and if there isn't a clear purpose-driven story for why you should work together, you have to create your own at that level of the work that you're doing, and be clear about the importance of the alliance so that you don't let any sort of enmity or animosity or dislike get in the way. It might interfere from time to time, but
sure, we're human.
We're human. Yeah, it's going to happen. I believe we anchor ourselves in the work we have to do together, and that's how we get past it. So there are two answers to your question.
I love that. It also makes me just recognize like that is a true professional,
yeah.
Right? Like when we can put aside whatever personal differences we don't like, but like, okay, let's get this done, and we'll do it as best as we can, like without anything. So yeah, that's sort of part of being a professional, and that's hard to learn because there's a lot of tools that go into that. There's like psychology and there's all kinds of good tools that have to get into that. But I have a question about what if it's just a job, right? So then you don't have this like, oh, we're going to save the world, collaboration superpowers. We're on a mission to help people do great things together remotely, because we believe like, the people that are going to solve the problem are not sitting in the room together. So how do we do it online? But so what if it's just a job where you don't have something exciting to be driving towards?
My first reaction to that is, if it's just a job, you need to get it together and figure out what you can do with your life that isn't just a job. Now, I'll step up from that. If it's just a job that gets you good paychecks to go do what you really love to do, whether it's fishing or skiing, pick your hobby. Some people work that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
They work, they reach 65, they're done, they're going to spend all their time skiing, right? They used to be they just take their good paycheck and go skiing, a couple times a year. Then you're working with purpose, aren't you? There you have a purpose for what you do. And the work itself may not be meaningful for you, but as long as you're upfront with yourself and your colleagues about that, that's okay in my book.
Right.
As long as, and I worked with a guy like that at IBM. He said, Carlos, I'm just going to tell you right now, I like what I do. It's fine. I'm good at it. I take a paycheck, but I really don't, I'm not that invested in it. You're
Right.
young. I was managing him as one of these situations where the young guy was managing an older guy. And he said, "You're ambitious. You're young. I get that. You don't need to inspire me.
Right.
I get what I need elsewhere." So that's okay too. Now, if it's just a job and you're miserable at it, I had a brother who was in this case, stuck with a job he basically hated for 30 years.
Whew.
Wow, can you imagine that? And he's not alone in that. That's when I have to pause and go, hang on a second. Why aren't you seeking career advice? Why aren't you looking for somebody to help you find something more meaningful? In his case, he just couldn't be bothered. It was just, he wasn't
Yeah,
a
I mean, and
lazy
fair
person, but
enough.
he just couldn't be bothered. To me, work is such a great place to grow and learn and develop and become more. And if that's what you want out of life and you're in it's just a job situation, go fix that. Go fix that. Um, I believe that even, and I'm not alone in this, I'm not the first person to say this, but even tasks that some might label menial, if you look at it through the right lens, it has an impact on society. It touches other people's lives, right? I mean, there's the old story of the mason working at the site of St. Paul's Cathedral. I think Christopher Wren tells the story. He's the guy who designed St. Paul's in London, but it's been translated into a guy sweeping the halls at NASA down in Florida. It's a little job. It's just one brick at a time or one pile of dust at a time. But on the one hand, you could say, yeah, I'm just sticking bricks together with mortar and I don't really care much about it. Or you could say, I'm building an edifice to the glory of God. You
Right.
could say, I'm just pushing a broom down the hall. Or you could say, I am a critical part of ensuring that NASA runs smoothly. Because if I don't do my job, dust can get into the very intricate systems and right that are here. I'm part of putting a man on the moon or going to Mars. Sure, it's
Yeah.
small, but it's really meaningful. So I'm a believer in that. Uh, I have worked menial jobs. I've been a doorman. I've been a cab driver back in the days when there were a lot of cabs around and there was no Uber. Jobs that aren't highly revered or highly thought of, but I found purpose in them. And that's what, here we are again, back at that word. I think we can find purpose in a lot of stuff.
This reminds me of a story. I worked in a pizzeria in Los Angeles for a long time, an outer space pizzeria, one of the best times of my whole life. And there was a long story. There was a
Like the
cook
one,
there.
wait, you have to pause. That's like the one in Toy Story. I don't know if you know the movie
Hi.
Toy Story, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I
this
haven't seen
outer
it in a while.
space pizzeria. Okay, sorry.
It really was. It had like glowing tables and a Cthulhu doll in the background and all kinds of comics. I mean, it was lava lamps on every table. It's Los Angeles, right? So
Yeah,
Hollywood. It was
yeah,
awesome. And
yeah.
but the cook there was named Fito, and he was from Argentina, and he took such pride in his work. Like not a single pizza went out that was not of a specific quality, and it was just came from he was just getting paid minimum wage plus tips like the rest of us.
Right,
There was no
right.
reason that he should care so deeply. But
Yeah,
I was always struck by he would be like, no, it can't go out now, like it's not done yet, it needs just this thing on it.
love it.
I loved that. It was just like inspiring to work with him, and it was just a
That's
pizzeria. So
brilliant,
it reminds me of that.
brilliant.
Oh, I have so much to say, but we're reaching the ends of our time. There are a
Sure.
couple of things though that I want to ask. Common pitfalls of team building. So we've talked about a big one, which is focused on team building activities like quiz
Mhm.
nights and things, when that isn't necessarily the real building blocks of collaboration. Like it's fun when you like your colleagues and you want to hang out together, but what are we doing? What else are we doing wrong with team building?
Yeah, I think, and this one gets me in trouble, but I have to put it out there. It's related to the team building one. A lot of the work that's done to build trust. Okay, trust inarguably is visible in effective teams, right? When you measure what are the common attributes of really effective teams, people trust each other. There are different kinds of trust, right? There's task-related trust, right? There is interpersonal kinds of trust. If you do trust building, and that's all you do. If I trust you, Lizette, and you trust me, therefore we will collaborate better. Again, the story of my wife. I trust my wife. We don't collaborate terribly well in some cases. It's important, in my view, trust is an outcome of finding ways people can work together productively. We can measure how well we're doing if trust levels are higher, but it's you don't make the pig any fatter by weighing it, right?
That's a good one.
You keep weighing the pig, it's not getting any heavier. You got to do other stuff. So you don't want to stop weighing the pig, but don't think by weighing it you're going to change it. The same is true with trust. So that's a big one. And I get grief because people say, no, if you look at Lencioni's model, trust is at the base. Yeah, and I think Lencioni's wrong. Trust becomes a powerful underlying attribute, but you don't start there. It isn't, as I said in a blog post a couple of years ago, it isn't a prerequisite.
Right. Like liking each other.
Yeah, right. Not a prerequisite. You can do lots of great stuff starting from different places that are actually more accessible to people in many, many ways.
Well, I like really your approach where you've really taken the approach that team collaboration depends more on individual motivation than it does sort of on some of these outlying factors like trust and team building, and then really getting to the heart of what is motivating people personally is going to get you where you want to go. So the guy that talked to you and said, this is for me just a job. I like the job, but I don't need the inspirational talks. Like knowing that as a manager, whereas somebody else might need that. Right. So I'm assuming that the more you know about someone's personal motivation, the more you can individually cater. I mean, I guess it gets harder when you have to scale at a certain point, but maybe, but you could provide something for every type of motivation, I would think.
I think you can, but let's move the manager out of that sort of top-down orientation where I need to know all my individual motivation. When it comes to a collaboration, I think you have to flatten the hierarchy. The degree to which you get your team members talking to each other about what motivates them. I'm in it for this reason. Here's what I love. Yeah, I think that's cool, but here's what I do. Here's what I'm excited about. That really starts to unlock the power of understanding motivation rather than the manager being the one who has to, because you're right, you could never scale that. You could never scale that. So it does require some flatness, as a Professor Lindy Greer at the University of Michigan explained to me. She talks about flexing the hierarchy. There are times when you need to use the hierarchy to just get stuff done, but there are times when, as the special forces do, you take off your stripes at the door. When you go into one of these after-action reviews, it doesn't matter whether you're a sergeant, captain, or corporal. Take off your stripes at the door and just talk to each other person to person. In my experience, this is what's required for great collaboration.
I love that. I did a motivation sort of, not a game. It was kind of a game. It was a set of cards and you get 8 different kinds of motivation. So it could be freedom, it could be power, it could be social, and you had to range them in order of what you were most motivated by to what you were least motivated by. So, and it was very interesting because there was a guy in the office who I was trying to be very professional and not being super social because I'm an American, like super excited, enthusiastic. And this is a very Dutch culture, like, very calm. So I was trying not to do it. And so I was kind of keeping my distance from people. And we did this exercise together. And one of the guys had his top motivation being social. Like for him, the most important thing at work was the social part of work. And it was an aha moment for me because I realized he was trying to become better friends with me. Like he was reaching out and I didn't realize that he was reaching out. And I kept pushing it back, like, no, we're not going to connect socially. Not realizing for him, that was key. And as soon as I realized that, it really opened up a friendship because it was like, oh, I understand. And I would love to be friends. I was just keeping,
I want to find that card deck. That sounds like a real winner. I like it.
It's a Management 3.0 Moving Motivators. If you just Google Moving Motivators, I'll send it to you.
Motivators, okay. All right,
it's really sounds perfect for you. Yeah, it sounds it's awesome. So, okay, we're really reaching end of time, but I just have a couple more questions. One is, you're clearly, being that I mean, I understand now that you have acting because I can hear it in your voice. There's an enunciation and, it made sense when you said you're an actor. What are your tips for speakers? Or people who are doing maybe webinars online? Do you have any sort of tips for how you can come across more personable or just speaking tips? that you've used? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. It's sort of a left field question.
A couple of things. Tricks I lean on, and I call them tricks because I had to learn them, right? I got into theater because I was naturally comfortable in front of groups, and it was the only place I thought I could make a living doing that until I discovered corporate training many years later and went, oh, okay, I could actually make money and have some fun being up in front of groups. But I wasn't, despite my affinity for it, I wasn't necessarily very good at it, right? One, stories are critical. So what grabs people are the stories. I recently participated in a 5-week series of seminars on how to market your solopreneur business better. And it was chock-a-block with information, but I found I checked out. This guy was 90 minutes every Thursday, and he was rattling stuff off at just blinding speed. But when he would stop and use a story to illustrate a point, that made it fun, that made it interesting, and that is what stuck. And I'm not naturally a storyteller. I'm not. So I had to learn to tell stories. In conjunction with that, I had to cut back on the content. So to make space for the engaging stories that make the content more likely to land and stick, I had to get rid of stuff that was not essential to the story I wanted to tell, the points I wanted to make. So the old saying, less is more, applies in public speaking, in my view. The more focused your message, and the more you can illustrate it at a human level with stories, the better. And then this final point is, I use eye contact even when I'm working over Zoom or other platforms. I need to feel like I'm talking to a person. If I'm addressing the crowd, it just doesn't. The feedback I get is it just doesn't land as authentic. And so I look for people to talk to. Now you have to be careful because some people feel a little self-conscious being looked at. But I'll always find 1 or 2 or 3 people in an audience. This was happening for me just last week with a client group I was working with. No, actually it was a group of students. I was doing some adjunct teaching as a guest lecturer. And there were 1 or 2 people who really were into it. And so I would speak to them.
Right.
It turns out other people are listening, other people are engaged, but what it does is it personalizes my tone. That's the real key here, right? It brings me down to a level of, I'm just talking to you guys, not lecturing. It's the last thing I want to do, or just another windbag with a lot of big ideas. I'm just talking to somebody about stuff that I think is cool. And so those are 3 things I would offer up.
Absolutely great tips. Absolutely great. Okay, so 2 final easy-ish questions. One is, given that you've worked at Mars for so long, I'm wondering if you have a favorite candy bar. Or if like...
You know what? I have a favorite candy. And actually the students I was working with last week, I asked them the same question. I said, what's your favorite Mars product? Bear in mind, Mars also makes pet food, a lot of it, runs veterinary clinics around the world, and makes food products in the US, Uncle Ben's, elsewhere, other things. But on the confectionery side, it is a peanut M&M.
Ah, amen. Same for me. It's just the best combination of flavor and crunch that there is.
A little salty in there, a little crunch, a little sweet. And when I'm really feeling indulgent, I'll go for the almond M&Ms.
Ooh, good reminder. I haven't had those in a while. Okay, also bad awesome question. I should stay away from food questions later.
Yeah, really.
Darn. Okay, so last question is, if people want to learn more about you and the book and the services that you offer, where is the best place to find you on the internet? What's the best way to connect?
I would go to my webpage, Carlos V. DePena, and I'm sure this will show up in your show notes, carlosvdepena.com. I am active on LinkedIn. I'm out there every day. I'm always looking for articles to share. So LinkedIn, Carlos Valdez DePena, the whole name, as well as on Facebook using my full name, Carlos Valdez, with an S, by the way, Carlos Valdez DePena. So those are some easy ways to find me. And I've paid good money to have people do search engine optimization. So if you just Google my name, you'll probably come across some of this stuff.
Right. So we'll put it to the test, but no, we'll put it all in the show notes to make it easy for people. So no need to go out and search. We'll have it. Carlos, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I took copious notes about what we were talking about, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you for your great questions, Lisette.
All right, until next time, everybody, be powerful.